All right, we're back at it. And this time, we're here in beautiful Vancouver, Canada, where we're bringing you Next Level Practice podcast episodes live from the floor of the Aesthetic Meeting 2024. This is the annual meeting of the Aesthetic Society, or the American Society for Aesthetic Plastic Surgery. It's a meeting we never miss. Over these next few days, I'm going to be interviewing our clients and friends from around the industry to bring you up-to-the-minute insights on what's working and what's not when it comes to patient acquisition and practice growth. Here at Influx, we're very serious about keeping up with technological trends and studying how these changes impact the way that our clients grow their businesses. But I, for one, am a big believer that truly setting yourself apart comes down to the nuances. So let's take some time over these next few days to interview people on the ground floor of aesthetic medicine and see what we can learn from them to help you take your practice to the next level. Okay, I'm back, and I'm now joined by a good friend and client of ours, Dr. Rand Stark. Dr. Stark, thank you so much for joining us.
Great, thanks for having me.
Yeah, so I'm excited because 1 year ago, not here, I was in Miami, I guess, right? But at this very same meeting, you sat down with us, and we talked a little bit about you being, I think at that time, about 4 years into private practice in Philadelphia, and I want to get an update today.
So we're on year 5 now.
Yeah, it's exciting.
Yeah.
First of all, congrats.
Thank you.
And I'd love to kind of hear a little bit about what you're doing, how the evolution of the practice. Our goal here is to bring insights to people. Maybe they're a little ahead of you or a little behind you or right where you are, but I think we can all learn something and we can all gain something from hearing from our colleagues and our peers. And sharing is just cool. I just think it's cool to share knowledge. I want to learn from you and your experiences.
It's the best way, right? You learn from others' mistakes and try not to make them, and you learn from your mistakes.
100%. And I feel like, the spirit of the Aesthetic Society in general is to have a peer, is to be able to learn from your peers. And I feel like for everything you give, you get something, right? So that's why I think sharing what you've learned in your career is so cool, because inevitably, you pay it forward and you get it back, right?
Yes.
So I want to pick your brain for all of those who are listening and watching,
Sure.
Kind of on what you're seeing in year 5. So your practice has grown. You were just telling me also that you've got a lot more non-surgical happening these days.
Yes.
So let's talk about that a little bit.
So you asked me earlier if I'm still doing non-surgical, or I am.
Right, yeah.
And, as a young surgeon, when you're starting your practice, you're not busy operating, right? So you're really doing non-surgical things, so Botox or other neuromodulators, fillers, other non-invasive treatments like lasers. So you're trying to build a rapport with your patients, and that's really what I did initially. I wasn't operating as much, so I kept seeing these patients, started building rapport. Next thing you notice, they start asking you for surgery, breast lift, mommy makeover, facelift, and you're operating on them, you're building their trust. Next thing you know, they're sending their friends in. So definitely the core way you build a practice, initially you have to do non-surgical. You're not just going to come out from training and start operating. I mean, nobody's going to trust you in your neighborhood yet.
Yeah, so that was a bridge for you.
Absolutely. And I still, you asked me also, am I still doing non-surgical stuff?
Yeah.
Of course I'm doing non-surgical. I like doing fillers, injectables, but I don't do it as much as I used to because I'm busier operating now 3 days a week. I'm seeing a lot more patients. I have a larger staff that we'll talk about in a second that are doing injectables and skincare and non-surgical treatments as well. So I've pretty much kept that core patient that helped me build my practice to myself because I hold them close to my heart, and some of them, our schedules don't work that much anymore, so I have given my nurses to do, but I still enjoy it. I try not to take that many more patients on from a non-surgical standpoint unless they specifically ask for the surgeon. So that's kind of how the practice has evolved on that from my end.
That's cool. So your OG patients that really helped you build it are kind of grandfathered in,
Yes.
And they get that perk.
You have to hold them close.
I know, that's really cool. I think that's very special that you give them kind of you hold them
Right.
in a different, esteem.
But in the same time, I wouldn't, as long as the patient's okay seeing the nurse, we're fine with it. But if they really ask to see the doctor, I will always see them.
Will there be a different cost to them for injections whether it be filler or neurotoxin, if they're seeing you versus one of your team members?
So we actually have not done that. I kind of have our prices the same because I don't want to cause any issues, but it is something I've thought about of increasing my pricing at this point. I do feel I just want to keep loyal to those patients who have followed me, and I don't want to suddenly come back and say, hey, I just increased my price by $5 a unit. And it's not fair to give one and not the other. So that has been a talk in the office to do that, to try to help the nurses build their side a little faster. And maybe it'll make the person think twice before asking, hey, I just want to see the doctor. So.
Yeah, I think it's very cool of you to hold it there for as long as you can, but it seems like a day will come.
It's coming, yes.
Yeah, it seems like it is coming. So you went from non-surgical to surgical, and you're kind of pushing back into non-surgical even more so now, but now building a team. You said you have a pretty big team now on the non-surgical side?
Yeah, so we've kind of evolved. We have four nurse injectors. 2 of them are also my surgical nurses, so it's back and forth. And we've grown now to 3 estheticians in the practice. So there's about 7 non-surgical providers, and then there's 1 surgical provider, which is me.
Yeah, that's a lot to keep busy.
Yes.
And something that you mentioned a minute ago when we were chatting before we hit record, that I really wanted to pick your brain on, is taking deliberate steps. Because I think exactly what you said. Of course, it's every practice's goal to push from surgical to that repeat patient on the non-surgical side. And of course, maybe back to surgery again one day where applicable. But I think that, in my experience, it can be easy to assume that the transfer or conversion from surgical over to non-surgical is just organic and natural. And it may occasionally come up where they ask, but there's got to be a lot of intentionality there. And I'm curious, and you were touching on this, I'm curious what you're doing.
So sometimes it's organic, but sometimes you have to engage the patient. So in our practice, we always give patients a questionnaire to see if they have any other interests. However, when you have a surgical procedure in our practice, we try to make sure the patient gets perks, right? It's a big investment, and we understand that, and we want to give back to the patient in a way for trusting us. So one of the things we do, we give them 10% off of all services within the practice. We used to do it for a year, and we changed that now for a lifetime, as long as they come once a year to continue getting a
that's
service. Cool. So that's one thing, and they like it. It's 10% off of pretty much anything.
If they've done any surgery with you, and as long as they come back, as long as they kind of re-up, so to speak, annually, they can retain this 10% for life.
Exactly.
That's cool.
Yeah, so that, and then there's other perks involved of receiving different things within the practice. From time to time, it's seasonal. There's packages with each practice, with each surgery. So it's definitely trying to keep the patient to come back, because it's very hard to acquire patients, right? And you want to keep that patient within the practice. You want them doing other services in the practice. You also get to see the patient that way from time to time. And it's the key. Retention is gold in our practice, because if you just operate on someone, a lot of times it's a one-time deal, or maybe they'll get another procedure in the future. But we don't. I think sometimes people underestimate how important retention is, because coming for your Botox 3 times a year, I mean, that's consistent revenue in the practice. Getting your fillers, getting your skincare, those are key to making a successful practice.
No question. I think people understand retention is the game, but I think they might overlook how much you bring your marketing costs down if you retain that customer versus one and done.
Right. I mean, you guys are the expert in it. It costs a lot to bring one customer into the office, so you want to make everything out of your investment.
100%. You said packages that go with surgery. Is that like a non-surgical package that you recommend along with the surgery? Is that kind of what you meant? Like
So we try to, let's say if it's a face procedure, we try to engage that. There's a lot of talk always. It's not just about doing the facelift. It's 50% the facelift, but it's also 50% taking care of your skin, the quality of your skin, and keeping up with it. So one of the things, we build a package. They see our esthetician 2 times before surgery, so now they're engaged to that esthetician. They're building rapport with her. She's introducing them to different skincare regimens, and that already now builds a trust with the esthetician. So, for example, the facelift patient after surgery will now see her one more time for a complimentary skincare service, and they tend to continue with that esthetician because they like the care. So there's always some kind of skincare package within any kind of procedure. We always use an elastin repair and recovery product that we really like, especially for my body procedures. They get Silogen, which is a scar care treatment as well. We also promote getting our lymphatic massages. So there's always things coming with those procedures, and I think patients enjoy that. They also get skin Medica vitamins as well. Vitamedica vitamins for pre-surgery and after surgery. So there's always things packaged into our surgeries.
Sounds like the skincare can be a big bridge. And I think that's somewhat obvious, but actually I think it's important to look at this. The skincare that maybe is properly suited for that surgery that you sort of prescribed or put together a recipe. And elastin is great. I mean, they basically created that category.
Right.
I guess they call it the sort of perioperative category of skincare, right? And that's a bridge to all the other non-surgical, though. Like you said, they'll then see that esthetician. Are they initially seeing the esthetician just to buy those products and then maybe get some guidance on how best to use them, and then that esthetician becomes a trusted...
It's not so much to buy those products, it's really to prep their skin for surgery, to prepare them, when we're talking about facelift, just to prepare them for the surgery.
This is in advance.
Because a lot of these patients come in, their skin's not even conditioned. They come in, they're dry. They're not even on the proper. You ask them, where are you getting your skincare? They say, Sephora or one of these, department stores, and they don't really know exactly what they're using. So you want to get them on the proper skincare because it makes a difference.
Of course, and I think again, it takes a lot of deliberate training and building out of SOPs to put this in place. Standard operating procedures, to have this be something that your whole team is dialed into.
Right.
So it makes a difference, but it's easier said than done, I think, right? Mm-hmm. And you can probably attest to that. I'm wondering where the patient connects with the esthetician. Do they give them guidance on how to... So where do they start to build that relationship with the esthetician? If they're a surgical patient that you're saying...
If they sign up for the procedure right away once they initiate the sign up, right away they get an appointment with the esthetician.
Got it. Yeah.
So my patient care coordinator already knows all the bundles, and she already knows how to direct them, right? Because it's key. It's a lot of times it doesn't need to come from me as the surgeon. It needs to come from my staff. Mm-hmm. So when the patient care coordinator is closing the procedure, she tells them, hey, don't forget about these perks. You're getting X, Y, and Z with our surgery.
So cool. So the product cost and the appointment with the esthetician is already baked into the surgical cost.
Yes.
So that's exactly where I wanted to go in terms of understanding how you're using the skincare to bridge. So you're bridging. They by default, they always get an appointment.
Always.
That's really cool. Are you using any software to help you manage this in terms of especially I think about that 1 year thing. How would you have to keep track of if they lapse over 12 months, then they no longer have that 10%. These are things that sound really cool, but like spreadsheets are annoying. So how do you...
We use our EMR and our point of sales. We use Nextech currently in our office, and I'm not very familiar with it, but the front desk girls are. They have their ways of putting it into the system that there's alerts.
Okay.
And there's other ways to contact the patients. One of the things that we initiate in the practice is once every birthday, they get a $100 gift card. Come back, So there's always engagement. So we continue our engagement with our patients consistently in any way we can. And there's little alerts under their name. So we know if they came back or not. And we have retention reports. So every 6 months, 4 months, the girls go back and see who has not come back. And they definitely get in touch with them in any way possible.
So you're managing all that within Nextech, because I know some people are using other kind of membership programs and referral program type software. Nextech's kind of powering all that for you?
Yes.
That's cool.
Yeah.
That's good stuff. When you send out the birthday thing, is that usually an email or a text or both? Do you know?
It's an email.
Okay. Are you doing anything with capturing SMS opt-in? I know this is big in med spa. It's a little less...
No, we started. So we started using a Textly service in our office.
Okay.
And we're trying to use it and see how it works. So when we have our monthly promotion or every 2 months we do a promotion we'll send it now through text as well, not just over email.
It's really becoming a preferred method.
I think it is, right? I mean, a lot of times people get emails, they don't open them, or it goes to their spam. We know that when you text someone, they're looking at it. Whether they open it, but they know that you sent them a text.
Yeah, well, even if it's just to clear out their text, the open rates are really high in text because you don't leave text really unread.
Right.
And that's been, I think, a really favored channel by consumers in the e-commerce space for some time now. But I think consumers are coming around to, it maybe seemed foreign from a medical vertical or something like that, but I think it's completely all becoming one. It's all coming together where even plastic surgery patients might not be totally taken aback receiving a text.
Right.
Which is...
But I believe it's interesting because I was just talking to someone. There's specific regulations on, texting people.
Big time.
Right?
Which is why I was asking the opt-in aspect.
Right. So I believe there's an opt-in, and if they want to cancel, they can cancel, and then we're done.
Right. And we set that up too with the leads that come in where a person does put in a cell phone number along with the email, then we can make sure they go into those opt-ins and you have those leads, again, that you can remarket to instead of just they didn't book this one time, whoops, we never hear from them again.
Right. Well, and that's key. It's not, even if you don't hear from them, don't lose that patient, right? They're still in your system.
Yeah.
Try to re-engage with them at some point, somehow.
Absolutely. So all those things that you're embracing, it's hard for practices to do at any stage. And even though, yes, you've been at it for 5 years, I have found that some of these things take a lot longer to implement because you're just getting certain foundational things in. In first year, you might, kind of just, you're building your patient base. That you have to focus just on build. And as you start to get more established, you then have time to do some things that are a little harder to get around to. So actually being able to get some of these retention things, these loyalty things, these memberships at your stage is actually, I think, quite impressive. I think people overestimate or underestimate how much effort they think they can do it. But I think if you're smartly just layering in more infrastructure, more stability, more repeated patterns of retention and SOPs, and it seems like you're
right,
pretty far along in that.
When you start your practice, you don't have time for it, and you don't have the manpower, and slowly you hire some more people, and you're giving them more things to do, and that's definitely one of the things I've always known how important each and every patient is that you have in your system, and you have to make sure that you have to somehow get them back into your practice.
You said something that I think is actually cool. You said what were we talking about with exactly how your team manages a certain thing? That's good, in my opinion, that you said they have this way of knowing if people have lapsed on their membership, and they figured it out.
Right.
This is something I need to learn to be good at, and I think that plastic surgeons who I've talked to are so used to having to do everything themselves. They kind of, you got where I was going with it, and I want to talk about delegation, and I want to talk about your team. I know that you've been very careful in kind of curating and handpicking the team that you've built. And obviously that's like so crucial to the success of a practice. So if plastic surgeons are listening to this who are maybe earlier in their career or maybe not even in private practice yet, I'd love for you to share your insights on that.
So hiring people is always the hardest thing in any business corporation you have, and human resources plays a large part in that, but we're not experts at that. So one of the things I did was I found myself a really good practice manager / patient care coordinator, and she was my first hire. And a lot of people came up to me and said, oh, I can do this for you, I can do that for you, a friend of a friend. But I knew that I wanted someone with experience. And when I say experience, it's not someone with just 2 years of experience. I hired someone who had 11 years of experience, and she came, she was in an ENT practice, then she was in another plastic surgeon's practice. So I didn't just hire someone because they said, I think I can do it. I knew she had experience in it. So that was the first hire. The other thing is we had a few interviews talking, and you got to hire someone with a personality, someone who's energetic, someone who can talk to people, because she's your face. And after you're done your consultation, she has to close that sales. And if they can't talk or build a rapport or a relationship, you're not going to close. So she was our first hire, and then, front desk, she initially was my front desk. My second hire, believe it or not, wasn't a nurse. It was actually an esthetician in my practice, because I realized how important skincare was, and I was able to do the injectables, so I didn't really need a nurse yet, and I wasn't busy enough from a surgical aspect that I couldn't handle the work myself. So I hired an esthetician, and same thing. I wanted an esthetician with experience, not just someone who had 1 or 2 years who finished. She had already 10 years of experience. She had a good following. Her reviews were amazing. I looked them up. I heard from one patient and other patients in the area how great she was. And she had specific experience and knowledge. She was smart. I asked her about different things about skincare. I really tested her out to see that she was knowledgeable, and she was. And it came back to retaining the patient, because I needed to start getting flow in my practice. So I knew that I can have a surgical patient and I can transfer that patient to her to take care of skin. So that started the back and forth.
That's a move you made pretty early on then.
Yes. So the retention came really quick, and we started getting a good flow, and we built her pretty quickly. I mean, within a year and a half, 2 years, she has a full book.
That's cool.
She's booked a year at a time.
We do have docs that we work with who say, okay, I'm bringing someone on, and the marketing strategy sessions we're having with them is how do we
it really depends
fill
on
their
you
book
as
up?
the surgeon. People aren't just going to walk off the street, and you have that way. I mean, we work hard to get the consultations in the practice, and as a practice, we don't really spend money on advertising for the esthetician.
That's the challenge, is they
Right.
question how much they should invest in that. And I think
Right.
you're thinking about it holistically.
Right. So you need to think of the whole practice together, because you're building such a good rapport with that patient in your consultation on the surgical side. They trust you, and you want the very best for them. And if they ask you, you'll tell them, hey, I think you should go see my skincare specialist, my esthetician. She can further talk to you about this, and she's really good at it.
Yeah.
So that was a nice venue.
That's
Then my next hire obviously was a nurse, and I hired a nurse with both. Actually, my first hire, she didn't have any injectable history knowledge. She graduated nursing school, but she was very smart. She had a prior career as a teacher, and also very energetic, very personable. I knew my patients would love her, so we brought her in, and my promise to her was that I would train her to become an injector. So I didn't need to rely that she was injected somewhere else and she's not doing it in a safe manner. I taught her for an entire year until she was allowed to inject her first patient. And I mean, she was a rock star. And she's great, and so that was kind of the path that started things going.
Cool. There's a lot, we could talk a lot about training and growing your own, so to speak, making sure they have the foundation that they need, but then training them on your own, or having to untrain them, and it's always the question.
That's the hardest thing to do.
I think the answer for me in my domain of expertise in marketing is to find certain things that signal the right foundation, and then bring them all the way there with your best practices and experience is better than, you might find a rare gem
Sometimes.
who's honestly just
There
smarter
is.
than you,
Right.
which would be great to find as much as you
Right.
can, and who has the
we have
foundation.
them now, because
Yeah.
I don't have the time to do those things.
Right.
So, that transitions now into how do you hire someone who's already trained that you can trust?
Yeah, that's another question. We could have a whole AHR conversation, but going back to this hiring and your first hire, first of all, I love that you built in the retention aspect, basically realizing you needed a sticky mousetrap with the esthetician early on. So that is in the DNA of the practice versus like this kind of bolt-on afterthought afterward. But it sounds like you had good luck in these hires. Do you have any tips for people who are looking, because you found people with all this experience happen to be on the job market. I don't know if that was timing or what advice do you give to people after?
Look at their CV. If they're jumping from one place to another with less than a year and a half,
Yeah.
I wouldn't hire them.
Yeah, so you were did it take a long, did you have to be picky and say no a lot in order to find them, or or did you just happen to get lucky and find them?
I was lucky because I found them pretty early, but I had many other people that approached me, and even a few estheticians that I said no to. I'm just, I was thinking of one that I specifically talked to a few times, and I was glad I didn't hire her. I know that she joined other practices, and she left right away, and you could see it in her CV. Every 2 years she was somewhere else. So don't hire them.
Okay. Are you working with a staffing agency when you do this, or what's your method?
I don't.
You just did it on your own?
I did it on my own. I get a lot of inquiries on my own in my office. But I just had one now while we're here, just the other day on my DM. A girl asking, I'm an MA, front desk, they just send me information.
But just
So
starting
I've been
out-
lucky with that.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
But I definitely think using companies, like Titan has a very good report, good reviews. I think it's smart if you don't know how to hire someone, absolutely reach out to them. And, they can help you, and that's a very valuable thing. Don't think just because it costs a lot of money to do, don't worry about the money, because you're going to save a lot more money in the long run by hiring someone bad, losing them, because every time you hire someone, it costs you money. Right? It costs you to train them. It costs,
Yeah.
so it's not an inexpensive thing to do.
Yeah, and we're talking about doing the right things to build a successful practice, and what I'm hearing is that the team is just, and of course this is true, but I don't think you can overstress how important team is to building a successful practice.
Team is everything. You got to trust them, and they're there more than you are.
Right.
Right, and the patients are engaged more with them than you are, so they are your face, and you have to invest, and they have to be good. And everyone, there's a standard procedure from the minute that patient calls your office, from the minute they walk into your office, and you have to follow it, because if you don't, you're not going to close.
Right.
And I just saw a lady that I operated on, and she goes back and forth, from Philadelphia. A lot of people spend their winters down in Florida. And she came and she saw me in the office, and she was actually seeing one of our estheticians that day. And she came up to me and she said, I just love your practice. And I was like, why? She's like, the service I get here is just unbelievable. I went to a practice somewhere in Florida. She's like, they made me put a large deposit on the phone. They couldn't find it. They didn't even know my name when I came in. So, service, white glove service for every patient. Treat everyone like they're your family.
That's a common theme we hear with people who have successful practices, and it sounds obvious, but it's also hard to do if you don't have that team that you trust to build that nice patient flow and experience that makes them walk away with that feeling of,
Yeah, it's you think it's an easy thing, but it's not.
No, I think
a lot of people can't do it.
I've watched practices hone this for years, and I do think patience is a part of it, and kind of build it in layers, build the foundation, and then build the team, and then put in the systems, and then and kind of, rather than thinking you're going to do it all overnight. That's how people, I think, fall on their head.
It takes time. 5 years, and we're still building systems, and we're getting better and better and better at it. And I wish one day it'll just go cruise control, but I don't think you'll ever get cruise control.
I think that's a mistake to think. This is my experience. I've been doing marketing and aesthetics, plastic surgery for 12 years. That it's a mistake to, and it's true in any business, that you're going to sit back and it's going to cruise, but you can definitely get inertia. No question. That you build inertia to the point where you have velocity, and there's a lot of things that start to happen for you,
but it's
that take a lot less effort.
It's positive energy. You need good apples, get rid of your bad apples right away. Mm-hmm. Don't keep them. Erica was asking me, when we were talking about people and retention. I've had employees that had to leave, and I already knew that I needed them to leave. I was just waiting, and most of them, I've never had to actually fire an employee. They just quit, and it was okay. I was never upset that they quit, because they were the bad apples.
It's just something about good cultures in general. And it doesn't, we could say that the bad apple was a bad apple. They also just weren't a fit. Maybe they're a good person. They just weren't a fit.
They are. Yeah, they're good people, but you're right. They weren't a fit.
Right. It's a question about good cultures and cultures that have a clear identity. So the people who know that they're kind of an outlier there, they kind of show themselves the door eventually. I've noticed this where cultures are clearly, deliberately built.
But it's like an athlete. If you're not good, you're not going to, you'll fade away.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, you got it. I agree. So I have two more questions, or
sure.
One or two more things I wanted to pick your brain on. As we're talking about what can others learn in building a successful practice, one thing I know is that as you did start to transition from, like you said in the beginning, you were focused a lot on non-surgical and into surgery. And I don't know if you would agree, but from kind of what I understand, you didn't go in on a low price point. You kind of came in saying, like, I'm building a certain level of brand kind of right away. And I think that's a question we get with newer docs asking us a lot, like, how do I kind of make that transition? So it's not the transition from how do I get people to trust me and let them, let me be their surgeon, but how do I get to the price that I want to get at? Should I start there? What advice do you have on that?
So when I was a resident, I went to one of our senior meetings, and they had one of the consultants, and she said something so important, and I still hold it with me today. Don't undervalue yourself. You just spent a decade training. You're worth a lot. And if you're going to undervalue yourself, people are going to undervalue you. So when you start practice, of course you have to be competitive in your market, but don't be the cheapest person. You don't have to be the most expensive person, but put yourself smack dab in the middle or a little bit more than the middle, because you're more than that, you know? So don't undervalue yourself, because if you do, then the patient can see it. And they're like, he doesn't even value himself. He's just, you know, doing a breast dog for so little. Like, why would I go to him? And don't be worried about it. Put a price on it, and they'll come, and they'll value you. One of the things we always see is patients try to come and compare prices. You know, we were just talking about that earlier. And, you know, let them compare pricing. I will never price match them, because I value myself. I value my training. I value the quality that my office provides them. The staff is great. So don't just give yourself a value and go with it. And you don't have to make yourself cheap.
Absolutely.
And make yourself have a consultation fee.
Okay.
I've never done a free consult. If they're not willing to pay $100 or $200 to come see you, even $500, they're not serious.
Yeah, we've seen some practices where they would have a consult fee, but maybe turn it off if they wanted to. So I call it turning it off. You know, go, okay, we're going to drop it right now. We want to get consult rate. But there was a much higher degree of no-shows in those consults that were free. I mean, and that's kind of...
They don't have any skin in the game.
No skin.
I mean, in today's world, you go get a haircut, and they tell if you don't show up, we're running your credit card. If you go to a restaurant, you don't show up, they charge you. So why are you not charging the patient for a consult? You know, we're even going to start that, I think, with our injectors and our estheticians, because, you know, you got to get the patient to have a skin in the game, because it's so easy for them to call and say, I'm not coming today because it's raining.
Yeah.
You know, what do you mean?
Yeah.
You know, we saved you a spot.
It's happening on the non-surgical side. Like you said, when I get my haircut, I love booking online, but I got to pay. And they're going to hold the spot for me, so I got to pay.
Right.
And you're right. A lot of restaurants now through Open Table and some of these other reservation apps, I got to pay.
The key point is don't undervalue yourself. Put a price tag on yourself and make sure you're worth it.
Absolutely. You mentioned Erica. She just did a talk that was, the title of the talk, she was asked to do it, so she didn't create. The title was something about, should I price match? You know, I'm botching the name, but, you know, if someone comes to me with a price from another surgeon, should I try to match it? That was the title of the talk she gave today. I'm talking about Erica Crawford, who's our president at Influx Marketing. And so you just said you don't do that, so that's pretty clear. Are you seeing a higher prevalence of that these days? Of people kind of asking you to do that, shopping?
Yes, I mean, there's different types of patients, and there's specific patients that do that. They'll go from surgeon to surgeon, price shop, and then they'll like you. You know, you give them a great consult, they see your work, they really like you, and then they start, you know, you give them your quote, and they're like, oh, wow, that's a lot of money. Yeah, but, you know, it's a lot of work, and it's a lot of time, and I'm going to take great care of you, and you're going to have a good result. And then they'll pull out this quote from another surgeon. And like, I don't understand why, you know, he's this much and you're that much, you know. Well, it's apples and oranges. I'm giving you something he's not giving you. And I think my work's good, and that's the value I give to my work, you know. It's, you know, I know it's not, I mean, if you want a Mercedes, don't go buy a Ford, you know.
100%.
They're both good cars, you know, but that's the way it is.
And it sounds like they've already decided they want you, but they're using it as a kind of a device to see if they can get your price down. But they've decided on you already.
And guess what? They'll sign up with me.
Right.
And they did sign up with me. And this happens multiple times. This happens, this is not an infrequent thing.
You're calling their bluff.
Always.
In essence.
It's a poker game.
It's a poker game, and someone who doesn't value themselves enough actually loses maybe even more than just on, okay, I'll match you. They lose because all of a sudden confidence is out the window for the patient.
Right.
It's kind of what I'm hearing you say.
Right, exactly.
Interesting. It's all psychological, but at the end of the day, it's not a mind game. You're not trying to play games. You're just saying, this is what I'm worth.
And the important thing is remove yourself from that equation. Don't deal with money. You have a patient care coordinator, and that's what I said. You got to make sure she's good, right? So my patient care coordinator, Lori, is amazing. I mean, when they talk about money, I just tell her, take care of it. You know, whatever you decide, you do. And she knows. And as a surgeon, I don't deal with it. She deals with it.
And you really, I agree with you. You shouldn't. I don't know if there are maybe starting out some people who have less resources that are trying to do that. And you got to do what you got to do. But when you're removed from it, it elevates and it exalts you. And she can speak. Your patient care coordinator can speak about you in the third person. And
right. She's credentialing you.
Right. And
you know, it's easier for her to tell that patient why she should use you and not the other person.
Yeah, absolutely.
You, it's a little bit different.
Yeah. Yeah. So in the evolution of your practice, I think I overheard you talking with Adam over here at our booth that you're working on building out your own OR.
Yes.
Is that right? How far along are you in that process?
We're in the very beginning process of this.
Okay.
every state has different regulations. It's taking us a good amount of time with the Department of Health to get approval, but we finally got the approval.
Oh, that's huge. So congrats. And that'll be right on site or at a separate location, or?
So it's right on site. It's adjacent to my office. It'll be a different entity. I'm hoping other colleagues will come use it.
I was going to ask if you're going to do the surgical center route like that.
Yes. Yeah. So it has a different name. I have 2 ORs. I really want to make it a special place for plastic surgeons because it's becoming harder and harder to find good places to operate, at least where we live. Pricing's going up. We don't really take our patients to the hospitals anymore. It's also a little bit of uncertainty. What if the surgery center comes and tells me, we don't want you operating? Well, we want to give it to someone else. Yeah,
you're de-risked.
You
have your own control.
It's a busy practice already. I mean, Monday, Wednesday, Friday operating days. I can't risk that anymore. So.
Yeah, I think it's that natural evolution as you grow. We're seeing. I mean, years ago when I started in this business, not a high percentage had their own ORs, but as they're growing, you just need full control of your schedule and of your time. But I think it's wise to open it up to your colleagues, as you said, because I've seen some who tried to create a really luxury experience, dedicated private OR, but the cost, if you can offset those things,
of course,
becomes quite a burden.
And it's interesting because when you talk to more senior plastic surgeons and you ask them, do you have one regret? What is it? They'll say, I didn't build an OR.
Interesting.
I've heard that multiple times.
What do you think is behind that in terms of that being such a heavy? I wouldn't necessarily have thought that would be a big answer.
I don't think it's about financials. It's about efficiency.
Okay.
It's about.
So if there's one thing they could go back and do again, that's kind of what you mean.
Yes.
I see.
And start it early. Don't wait till you're in your last 10 years of your career. Do it, within the first decade of your career because you're not going to be able to do it. And I wouldn't recommend doing it. Don't build an office and build an OR right away.
Again, that layering stack.
It'll come, right? So it's year 5. Now I'm doing it.
Cool. That's what I love because every year I'm going to talk to you and be like, okay, what are you doing now? What phase, what era are we in now? On the OR side thing too, I always encourage people to our clients it's a marketing opportunity, but it's hard to make sure that you're conveying that correctly and why that is such a benefit to the patient, from privacy to safety to discretion and just all of those aspects. And I think sometimes that gets overlooked as a marketing opportunity to say, this is just yet another reason, and not a small one though, that the overall experience here will be elevated from the competition.
At least in our situation, in my practice, it's a nice setup. It's a building right across from the hospital. They feel comfortable that there is a hospital across the street, but they also realize why we don't go to the hospital. And I think the experience in a private surgical center is a lot better than the hospital. We have our own staff there. We have board-certified anesthesiologists. They have the best care that they can ever think of, So I'm looking forward to it.
That's amazing. Do you have any other advice you would give for, again, docs early in their career or maybe not even yet out in private practice?
Don't think that you need to come out with a big bang. Don't think you need to have a glorious office right away. It's okay to rent space. It's okay to take small steps. Don't feel, one of the nice things is I didn't have to take a loan. I did it small. I rented small space. I got some patients. I started, seeing patients. I was smart about it. And, I found the right office space with, a good lease, with a good tenant improvement allowance. So just do small steps. Don't think you have to come out with a huge bang.
So what I'm hearing is slow and steady wins the race, kind of.
Always.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I don't know what percentage of docs, surgeons going into private practice take out a loan, but I feel like a lot that I talk to, it seems to be a very high degree, a high percentage. So that's impressive.
Right.
Sets you up for success.
Yep.
So congrats on 5 successful years and all that you have coming up. And thanks so much for sharing with us and our audience.
Let's see what we talk about in year 6.
I'm excited. I'm excited.
All right, man.
Thank you, Dr. Stark. Appreciate the time.
Thank you.